Good afternoon and welcome to and thank you for attending the Dibble 2020, September 2020 webinar, Teen Relationships Matter, with a chance to take a good look at the work done by Ted Futris and Cindy Shuram in Georgia. We really appreciate their being here today. Please raise your hand on oh, by the way, my name's Kay Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Dibble Institute. I'm here in California where we don't have any sun, which is why my office is so dark. It's just really strange today. And for all of those of you who are joining us from California, I feel your pain. We'll get through this. We're resilient people. Anyway, so go over to your control panel and please raise your hand if this is the first time you've ever attended a Dibble webinar. Take a look and see who's new to the party. Please raise your hand if this is your first Dibble webinar. Great. Well, I want to give a special welcome to you. We do these every second Wednesday. That's why we call them the second Wednesday webinars. They're always free. We've done them for 4 years now. And we think we bring really good information to the field, really helpful tools and tips and research. So glad you could join us. So the next slide. There's lots of ways to participate today. You can ask questions. We'll be giving polls. We may ask you to raise your hands again. If you cannot hear us, as with everything technology, probably the best thing to do is log out and log back in and see if it works a second time. And if not, there's a phone number on this slide, as it's also in your invitation, with a phone number to call in if you can't go online. So there's lots of ways, and we'll try to help you if we can. So the next slide, these wonderful people are Charlie and Helen Dibble. They're the founders of the Dibble Institute. That's where we got the name. Now, Charlie, he was a mentor of mine when I was a young person. And when he was in retirement, he started doing a lot of youth work in our hometown of Redlands, California. And he saw that young people's trajectories would shift if their family life became unstable. And they often shifted for the worse. He also saw that young people were not confident of their ability to get and stay married or to have long-term, long-lasting relationships and family. And it really upset him because he cared about young people deeply. So he made 2 strategic decisions that we continue to this day. So he consulted, let me just back up and say, he consulted leadership in the country, researchers, about what they knew about long-lasting relationships and families. And they could go on and on about this. Dr. David Olson up at University of Minnesota, Dr. Howie Markham at the University of Denver, and they could go on and on about what they were learning. This was in the mid-'80s. But they couldn't tell him how they were reaching young people. And he thought that was a tremendous gap, and he really, really wanted to fix this problem for young people. So he made 2 strategic decisions that we follow to this day. The first is that what the Dibble Institute does is we help young people gain agency in their intimate relationships. And we do that by translating research into teaching tools that we make widely available to other organizations to implement with their young people. So we are not a direct service provider. We instead rely on clients, and we support their work. And we're big fans of people who are doing this important work of relationship education. So next slide. This is where Dibble, this is who we are today. We're now in all 50 states, multiple countries. We're an independent national nonprofit. And last year we estimate, and this is only a very conservative estimate, that we reached over 81,000, reached over 81,000 young people. So we means you in the room who teach our programs. We helped 81,000 young people get smarter about their love lives, and we're very grateful to you for that. Now, the Dibble Institute is firmly placed in the relationship skills world. It's really important to know that. We're relationship educators. Our programs are used by other organizations to address interpersonal violence, mental health, high school graduation rates, life skills, employability skills, and pregnancy prevention. So what we've learned through years and years of research is there's so many benefits of teaching young people these skills that give them agency. And while we do include information on contraception and family planning in our materials, you would not mistake a Dibble program for a sexual health program. Instead, we leave those decisions about how to approach sexual health and reproductive health up to local communities to implement per their own community approaches or their own organizational approaches. That's why we have different versions of our materials that can be implemented with either comprehensive sex ed funding or sexual risk avoidance funding. Our goal is to help young people gain agency in their intimate relationships, which is compatible with both approaches to sex education. And Ted is going to cover this a little bit more from his point on, kind of on the ground person about how he used two different kinds of funding to do this programming. So before we begin, I just want to go over some of our core values. The first is, and we've already talked about this a little bit, is that we believe in research. We believe in science. And when the research changes, when we learn new things, we change our content. Now, this hasn't, we haven't swung widely one way or the other, but there's subtle differences around cohabitation or domestic violence that we have honed, is how I think of it. We've gotten better and more precise. So you can count on the fact that all our materials are based in research, excuse me. And then our second value is that Charlie knew, and kind of intrinsically, but research has borne out, that the children are best protected and nurtured in families that are safe and stable and healthy. And so we applaud the countless single parents every day doing the hard work of raising children. They are doing tremendous, tremendous work. But it's also really hard physically, psychologically, socially, emotionally, financially. It's hard raising kids on your own. And so we give single parents a lot of respect. And we're trying to help educate young people about how they can raise children with a partner and do that. So it's not to disrespect single parents, but just because often raising with a partner is easier and better for children. We also believe that relational and sexual violence is wrong, it's bad, it should be stopped. And so there are, Ted, if you just go back one. And so there are justifiable reasons to end a relationship. We aren't in this for like, do it forever, even if times are bad. If it's bad, it's bad. Get out and, take one of our classes if you want to find out how. Yet we also know that most young people, 70 to 80%, and this has been consistent for like the last 30 or 40 years, tell us that a good marriage and family life is extremely, not just kind of, but extremely important to them. So we see what we do as empowering young people to create the lives they choose, that they want for themselves. And whether or not they eventually marry, we've given them the tools they can use in other intimate relationships with family, friends, and colleagues. So these are like critical life skills. Finally, we at the Dibble Institute believe that all people should be treated with respect and that all relationships can get better with relationship skills. It doesn't matter who you bring to the party. It's always good to know how to communicate and solve problems and how to voice your expectations and do those kinds of things. So this means we write our materials not assuming the gender of your partner. It means that we put in specific scenarios for young people that are for gay and lesbian couples because they have unique situations that they have to address. And as a result, our programs have been used in both in church settings, but also schools and programs specifically focused on LGBTQ youth because relationships are complicated. no matter who your partner is, and we can all use help for sure. So let me just introduce Ted and Cindy. Ted is the state specialist for extension. He can probably tell you his real title better than I. In Georgia, he teaches at University of Georgia, and Cindy is the extension agent working directly with youth in a county in Washington County there in Georgia. So we're very pleased that they took the time to be with us today. Please welcome Ted and Cindy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Kay, for having us both here today. We're happy to share with you some of the things that we've been doing here in Georgia, and so excited to see so many folks. We're like up to 279 folks so far. This is huge. This is great. So happy y'all took some time this afternoon to participate. You know, I am the state specialist in at University of Georgia. And what that means is I provide support to our county agents in family life education programming. So for all of you joining us, if you're not part of a land-grant university, each state has a land-grant university. And at that land-grant university, they have a three-part mission of research, teaching, and outreach. And so you likely will find a counterpart to my role here at Georgia in your state as well. So I encourage you, if you have not worked or partnered with cooperative extension before, they're a great resource. Oftentimes, you may be familiar with extension from the sense of 4-H, which is Cindy's background and training, and she'll introduce herself here shortly as we get into the presentation. But our 4-H agents do great work with young people and could be a great resource, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about that here today. You know, I don't need to go over this too much in terms of why adolescent romantic relationships matter. I think you all are on because you understand the value of it. But just for those aware, this might be new. Adolescent dating is, we know from research, associated with both positive outcomes as well as possible risks. If they are engaged in healthy relationships, making good choices, it can result in positive outcomes. Doing better in school, aspiring to do well after school, making good low-risk choices. But if they're in unhealthy relationships, it could really impact their esteem, their value, their self-worth, and which has implications for how they do in school and other outcomes. We know that risks are also linked to poor models. As Kate mentioned, we have a lot of children grow up in single-parent households and a lot of single parents who are doing a great job. But we also have kids that are struggling in both single-parent and two-parent. Just because mom and dad are married does not necessarily mean that that child is growing up in a healthy, stable home. It could still be a home where poor modeling of healthy relationships and beliefs and practices are being modeled. So relationship education really can be helpful for young people to not just reinforce maybe good things they're seeing, but also help promote those healthy behaviors that maybe they're not seeing and aware of. And so with youth-focused relationship education and the great resources that the Dibble Institute offers, and we're going to talk about Relationship Smarts Plus program, which is what we've been using here in UGA Extension, really focuses on teaching young people skills, helping them, promote safety, healthy life choices, and so I often have to, I often explain to folks that are curious, like, why we want to do relationship education. Their concern is, are we teaching them about, are we trying to bestow upon them particular values? And is it faith-based, or is there an agenda? And I go in and say, no, there is not. It's research-based. This is what research has shown really helps develop healthy relationships in general, but also the great resources that Dibble has are specific to young people. What research has shown makes a difference to helping young people develop these these skills that they need. And what I always tell agents when I do trainings is what I really love about the Relationship Smarts program and the other resources available is it's not about teaching young people what to think. It's teaching them how to think. It's giving them the skills to make those choices. Those of you familiar with the Relationship Smarts curriculum and some of the others, the decide, don't slide approach, how to make those smart decisions. So we're big fans of the Relationship Smarts program and the resources. And what we've learned is that the context in which the programs are delivered does matter. How you deliver it in an after-school setting, out-of-school setting, is going to vary a little bit from how you deliver the program in an in-school setting, or the age at which youth receive it. We've been very successful in delivering this program to both middle schoolers and high schoolers, but most of the youth we reach are typically in the middle school, and you'll hear that today. We'll share Cindy's experience delivering this with 7th and 8th graders, and that context matters. So we're really focusing here today on thinking about that context and what are some of the ways that we have developed those sustainable relationships with both school and community partners to deliver this program. We'll share a little bit about things to consider when you're delivering relationship education across those various settings, and then we'll close with sharing a little bit about our evaluation. It's a simple evaluation, not too complex. There's a lot more we could do and we want to do, but I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we do and how just a little bit can actually go a long way to not just showing your outcomes, but really helping you develop those sustainable partnerships where you can continue to deliver this programming. Okay. So just to put some context as to what our experience, our background with doing this programming, we've been offering Relationship Smarts here in Georgia through our UGA extension system since roughly about 2008, 2009. And now, this is not to say that there aren't other organizations in Georgia delivering relationship education. There are. There's some great folks, Flip, my friend Flip, and folks down in Conyers, Georgia, who are doing great work with Relationship Smarts and have a federal grant. Bethany Christian Services is an organization here in Georgia that does great work with young children, particularly those in foster care. So we're not the only game in town, but we're very glad to be part of the game. And so our agents, both family consumer science agents and 4-H agents, have been delivering Relationship Smarts across Georgia. And as you can see here on the slide, Georgia's a pretty big state, a lot of counties, and currently we have agents that have been trained to deliver the program across 76 counties in Georgia out of the 150. And to date, we've reached almost 15,000 kids through our in-school and out-of-school programs. And you'll see kind of those spikes in our numbers there in the table. And in 2012, 2014, we were fortunate to partner with the Georgia Division of Family Children Services and some others in the state on the Personal Responsibility Education Program, or PREP, which some of you might be familiar with. It was federal funding, came through the state. And so we worked with that team, and as part of that, we delivered the Relationship Smarts program and an evidence-based sex education program to youth through after-school programming. So the youth that received the program were getting both curricula, because we felt that, as Kate mentioned earlier, Relationship Smarts is not a replacement for, say, a established sex education curriculum. And so we delivered the sex education curriculum, but we supplemented it with the Relationship Smarts, because often what's missing in those sex education curricula are helping young people develop those relational skills and putting sex within the context of that which it occurs, which is a relationship. And so it was a great opportunity, great work that we did there. And that prep work continues today throughout the state. Then more recently, and this is where Cindy really came on board and was part of this team, where we've been working with the state DFAC's office on their Title V state sexual risk avoidance education grant. Now, we're one of the providers as part of this grant, and what we do is we focus on delivering the Relationship Smarts program as part of our project and in our programming. And so that's what we'll share here with you today, is a little bit about what we've done and what we've found and those lessons that we've learned in implementing it. And you'll see here on this map, hopefully you can see that there's this one county with a star, and that's Washington County. And that's the county that Cindy is from. So you can kind of get a sense of where that's situated in the state. And I'm up here, and I'm up in Clark County, which is where University of Georgia is situated. And if you're curious, Atlanta is in that Rockdale, DeKalb County area is where Atlanta is. Most folks are familiar with Atlanta in Georgia. So now, as I mentioned earlier, we use the Relationship Smarts program, which has gone through some revisions, updates over the last several years, going from version 2.0 to 3.0 to now 4.0. But the core foundation and content of the program has really remained rather consistent. And so I've included the lesson breakdown. You can go on Dibble's website to get the details of that. I've highlighted in yellow, though, what you'll hear us and Cindy talk about here shortly as the core lessons. These are the core lessons that we typically focus on, because we're often in situations where we have limited time, limited number of sessions with the youth, and so we have to make hard decisions as to what lessons we should deliver. And these core lessons were partly identified through our partners at University of Auburn, who had really worked with the Dibble Institute early on in the early development of Relationship Smarts, and identified these as kind of the core lessons that at minimum youth get to benefit from the program. So our agents really focus on, first and foremost, making sure that youth get the core lessons, and if time permits, they do all the lessons or more of the lessons. And you'll hear how Cindy has implemented this as well. Now, new to the program, though, in versions 3.0 and 4.0 are the lessons on sexual decision-making in pregnancy, STIs, and HIV. Now, in 3.0, these two lessons were collapsed into one lesson, and in 4.0, they were separated out. Right. So, and I point that out because when Cindy got started, they were originally collapsed, and then this past year, when it was 4.0 came out, they were separated out. So our goal is to try to offer both those lessons when possible. So a little bit of context. Won't go too much more into the specifics of the curriculum, but you can get those details online if you're not familiar. So now, before I introduce you to Cindy, and we're going to do like a little Q&A, change it up a little bit here. And so she's going to share some of her experience. I want to share this video with you. This is a video we put together last year because Cindy's just done a great job, and I know she's probably turning red and blushing right now, but she's done such an amazing job over the years delivering this program. And so we sent out a crew to interview some of the parents and teachers and principals there, and so this kind of summarizes kind of their story, their success. And so if your volume on your speaker is turned down low, you might want to turn it up just so you can hear this. If by chance you experience any problems, any delays on your end seeing or hearing the video, I do have the link to the video there, where you can just type that into your browser, pull it up, and you can watch that later if you like. All right, so I'm going to play that now. Adolescence is a time when young people are trying to figure out who they are.
Well, being in middle school, it's a tough time for kids, and they are exposed to a lot of things that they don't understand.
Relationships, and their role in relationships is part of that development. And a lot of young people aren't clear, what does a healthy relationship look like? Not many folks are talking to young people about what healthy relationships are. And young people really want this information. They don't know how to ask. They certainly don't feel comfortable going to parents many times to talk about it. And the models for healthy relationships are lacking for many youth across Georgia.
When you text somebody something, okay, when you talk to somebody through the use of devices, through the use of technology, you miss out on the important parts of communication.
The Relationship Smarts program is very interesting. I feel that it's very relevant to what our students need to be learning at this time to build those communication skills.
Relationship Smarts is outstanding curriculum that helps youth learn how to develop good relationships. They learn a lot of important skills, life skills that are essential for becoming adults.
The skills that students develop in Relationship Smarts are getting along with others,
Effective communication skills. They learn the difference between good and bad relationships. They learn how to recognize those differences. And most importantly, they learn how to form a solid foundation, a good foundation as they're developing these relationships. People exaggerate or present themselves in a certain way. Why do you think they do that? I've noticed as the year progresses that the kids become a little more open to discuss relationships and situations that they face from day to day.
And our agents are a great resource for our young people in counties, particularly small rural counties where there aren't a lot of resources. And many times our agents are the one person that young people feel comfortable going to and talking to.
One thing that the Relationship Smarts program brings to our kids is an opportunity to express themselves on various levels. So whereas they may not be able to have a conversation with adults, we'll find that they will be more open with their peers, other colleagues. So therefore, when kids participate in this program, I found that they are relaxed, and therefore they're more open, therefore more engaged in the program itself.
Well, I have heard some children repeat some of the things that were said in the program. When there was an issue that came up in the class and someone said, but you remember what we said in 4-H?
She really enjoys learning about the pros and cons of being in a good and bad relationship and the ups and downs if you don't speak up if there's a problem.
The speaking, listening, communication skills that I learned was where I speak and they listen and they speak. I listen. Today, when I talked to my math teacher, I believe it was a concept I didn't understand. So I asked her, can I do it again? And she listened and she taught me again. So I repeated it back to her in the way I understood it.
And the children learning better ways, they'll be able to take that out into the community and show it to others, to the adults too. And it makes a better community.
And so that's one of the videos we put together to, one, showcase the success here, but also we use it as a way to kind of promote, because as we're trying to go into the schools and the communities and promote the program, it's helpful for them to kind of see what it's about. So I'm gonna introduce here Cindy, who was in that video that you saw, and Cindy's been with UJ Extension since 2005. She's been delivering the program Relationship Smarts since 2013, and to date, she's reached almost a little over 1,800 youth in our county. And so, welcome, Cindy. How are you?
I'm good, Ted. Hope you are.
I'm doing great. Thanks for being with us here today. And we're gonna, just gonna have a Q&A. So I've got some questions I'm gonna be asking Cindy. And for those of you who are out there, if you have questions, follow-up questions, anything you'd like to ask as well, you can put those in the question or the chat, and Kay will let us know if there's some questions that pop up and as follow-ups. And so we're just going to have kind of a conversation. So a little bit different, than the traditional, let us talk to you sort of webinar. So we hope this will be a little different, a little fun. So, so I want to start off by asking Cindy, so tell us a little bit about like your background, what experience you had before you came into Extension, and even before you started delivering relationship education.
Well, to begin with, I graduated with a degree in psychology from Georgia College. When I got out of school, I worked at a rape crisis center for a year before I moved back home. After I moved back home, interesting change, I worked at a local trucking company as a dispatcher and then in the safety department. I met my husband there. And of course, I wound up going to a different position at another place, and that was at a local bank. That was when I saw an ad in the newspaper for the 4-H position in my county. And since I had also served with youth or worked with youth as a youth director at church, I thought that that would be the perfect job for me. So I applied. Now, since being the 4-H agent here in Washington County, I've taught many different lessons, many different programs, and some of those include childhood obesity prevention, Health Rocks, which is a curriculum talking to kids about drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, stress management, and financial literacy.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting kind of that path, that journey, and where you are today working with young people. And so now you've been working with young people for quite since 2005, almost 15 years, and doing relationship and teaching relationship education right now for 13. And so I'm curious, our audience, Rebecca, if you could put up our first poll question, kind of how long, what's your experience like? How long have you all been teaching relationship, involved in teaching relationship education in general? And you should hopefully see that poll question. Now, Rebecca, on my end, I don't see the poll, but I assume it's up there.
Yep. Can you see the results?
I cannot see the results. I do not see the results. Could you read those results out to us?
Yeah, so not applicable is 22%, less than a year is 19%, novice 1 to 5 years is 35%, or pro 6 or more years is 24%.
All right, so we've got a good range of experience here delivering relationship education. And so obviously I assume those that are not applicable might not be the ones working directly with youth, but might be involved kind of at either policy level or director level, possibly. But we got some new folks and some very experienced folks, so kind of all over the spectrum. So thank y'all for replying. So Cindy, tell us like why. So what brought you to relationship education? Why did you decide to start offering relationship education to youth?
Well, Ted, I remember walking into my OBGYN's office when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I saw signs posted throughout the facility that specified that local students would receive a certain amount of time out of school when delivering their baby. That truthfully broke my heart. And I knew then that pregnancy was a huge issue in our county and didn't realize how much of an issue until recently, looking at charts and all. But I decided I wanted to do something to help make a difference. Now, that was back in 2006. Well, I decided later on to teach relationship smarts because I'd heard other agents talk about how great the curriculum was. So I decided to begin offering it in an after-school setting. And I noticed that youth were responding positively to the curriculum. They were interested in what I had to say. So I decided later to approach the middle school principal and discuss the possibility of offering the curriculum to 7th grade students.
That's great. So yeah, so it's interesting now how they're it must have pregnancy definitely was very prevalent, I think, in your county, and I think we're going to show everybody that trend a little later. it's quite surprising how in yours, Washington County is a rural county. I think you mentioned earlier today, we were talking 22,000 in your county, right? So and the pregnancy rate was quite high, and we're going to see that a little bit later. So what is it? So why did you transition? So you mentioned you started delivering the relationship education to young people in an after-school setting, and then you made that transition to in-school setting. Why did you make that transition, and what was that like? What was that transition like?
Well, I mean, I decided that I could reach more kids in school. So of course, like I said earlier, I reached out to our local principal, talked to the superintendent to see if that was a possibility. And as far as transitioning to in school, it was awesome because I was able to reach more kids and make a difference with those kids. So as far as the way the students responded, they were all positive, they were interested, they were engaged in the curriculum. So it was definitely beneficial to go in school and reach more kids.
Yeah, and when you got started doing it in school, you were doing it with all the 7th graders, right? I mean, you got into all the 7th grade, right? And so how did, well, I guess before we get into that, let me ask, Rebecca, if you put up that next poll question, for those on, if you are currently delivering relationship education to youth, where are you delivering it? Are you doing it in school, out of school, or both? And Rebecca, I assume you put the poll question up, right?
Yes.
You got it up, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so in school is 30%, out of school is 36%, and both is 34%.
All right, wow, nice mix. So I think, and delivering that in school versus out of school, that context is it's a little bit different, right? And so Cindy, when you did this in school, when you made this transition, how did you get that school buy-in? Because I know agents, I've talked to agents, they've shared how, let's see, agents have had that experience of it's a little easier to go after school because after school programs are always looking for resources, always looking for support, people to come in, programs to offer the kids, but going into school, it's like, well, we got enough to do. We got milestone testing, and we got this and that. So how did you get the buy-in and the support of your school?
Well, I had taught the curriculum in an after-school setting, not only to get familiar with the material, but to also show impact, to get that impact information. When I was ready to approach the school with the material, having that impact made a great difference. It made it easy to approach our principal and superintendent to show that impact of the students that were reached after school. I know I keep saying impact, but that is so important. I also shared with them the topics that would be covered, which helped outline the material. And I know you've got challenges on there too. And for me, honestly, I didn't face any challenges. And a lot of that was because of my relationship with the school and the administration staff. I had built that relationship over the years by offering the curriculum the school needed, some of that curriculum that I mentioned earlier, and by remaining transparent with the principal and teachers. It definitely helps when you have those relationships.
Yeah, those relationships matter, right? So it's not just about teaching relationship skills, but it's practicing those skills, right? And I have a colleague, an old colleague, retired colleague, who always would say relationships matter, right? It's building those relationships and the time it takes to develop those relationships. Because obviously, when you brought relationship smarts to your school, now, you've been an extension agent, 4-H agent, what, for 8 years, right? And you were doing programming in the schools already, so you had already established a reputation and a trust with them, right?
Right.
Okay, and they were, and so were there any kind of lessons learned in that initial process when you got on board? Because I'm sure we have some of our folks here that are might be interested in going into the schools. Any tips you would offer them about like how to get in, who do you reach, how do you go about that?
Well, obviously you have to go to administration. Like I said, I talked to our school superintendent, I met with the principal, and again, I took that impact to them from the after school programming that I taught. It's important also to share the information in regards to the program. In other words, paint that clear picture of how the curriculum can benefit not only the students, but the school. And another tip to remember is, if you're having trouble getting into the school, 4-H is a great resource.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're out there and you haven't connected, say, with your UJ, your state's extension system, definitely do so and find out who the 4-H agent is. Go visit, meet with that 4-H agent. That might be a good way to start, right? To just go sit down with the 4-H agent in your county, ask them what they do, where they do programming, set them at ease to reassure them that you're not trying to step on their toes or take over what they do, right? Because sometimes in some communities, small communities particularly, they're limited resources and people are competing for those resources. But I think you'll find that our folks in extension are always looking to partner, always looking to work with folks, and sometimes that 4-H agent or even family consumer science agent might be that resource that helps open the door into a school, and so they can be great partners in that. I think, Cindy, I've also heard many of our agents who've done the programming, it's fine. Sometimes the administrator might be a little intimidating to go to first, and so sometimes finding a teacher who can champion your program, right? So finding that teacher that has a ear maybe of the administrator that can set up that meeting and say, I really think you should hear this. This is great. And sometimes teachers learn about these programs like Relationship Smarts. I know here in Georgia, many of them did because they attend these conferences like we do a family consumer science teachers conference here. And I know many of our family consumer science teachers in the schools learned about Relationship Smarts that way. So there might be other opportunities to reach teachers, to educate them about this type of programming. So there are a few different ways to go into the schools. So tell us a little bit about, Cindy, about like what classes do you teach Relationship Smarts in? Where do you teach this?
Well, it's kind of odd, I would say, but because of my relationship, again, that relationship with the school, and the lack of having a health class in our middle school, we used to, but they don't have it currently. I'm able to offer the curriculum to all students in each social studies class. Now, I did not choose that class. It was the class they put me in. I think that the school, well, I know that the school saw value in the program and they wanted to make sure that each student was reached. Now, typically, I offer Relationship Smarts to about 28 students per class in a 60-minute time frame on a monthly basis. That, of course, is until this year. This year it's going to look a little different with the COVID situation. One thing I do recommend is having teachers stay in the room while you're teaching so they can not only see what you're teaching, but they can help provide support if there are any issues that come up with students. But go ahead, Ted.
I was going to say, that's such a good point, right? I mean, because you want the teachers to kind of see what the kids are learning because they then can be an advocate for you continuing to do it, right?
Right, absolutely. And, truthfully, Ted, most students are so focused and engaged in the material, there's not an issue.
No. Well, and I've heard some even say, boy, where was this when I was in school? And others say, I need this information right now in my own relationship, so I'm a student as well, So
Right.
yeah. Well, tell us a little bit, like, so in 2018, you made this transition because you started off in school doing it with all 7th graders, but in 2018, you started doing this with all 7th and 8th graders. Tell us a little bit about why and what has that been like? What have you noticed?
Well, I initially taught what the UGA Extension State team recognized as the core lessons, and these are the lessons that Ted highlighted earlier in this presentation. And I taught this to 7th grade students. You know, I felt that the curriculum had so much more to offer, so I once again approached the principal and asked if I could reach the 8th graders with the remainder of the curriculum. Now, I had already met with 8th grade students, so there wasn't any concern on my part with adding these classes to my schedule. And, you know, I've also noticed that there's greater impact by reinforcing what the students learned in 7th grade by offering the second half of the curriculum to 8th graders. And again, the 8th grade students, they're interested, they're excited to receive the second half of the curriculum, they're engaged. And you know, it's really cool because as y'all saw in the video a little bit ago, Ty Poole, one of my 4-Hers that's grown up in the program, he actually just graduated high school. Ty shared how the speaker listener technique that he learned through the curriculum made a difference with him in speaking to his math teacher about something that he didn't understand. When she taught it to him, he was able to repeat it back to her. So she knew that he got it and he knew that he got it. So that was really neat to have Ty share that on the video.
Yeah, and so it just goes to show that, like, the skills the kids are learning isn't just going to help them in their current or future romantic relationships, but it's a testament to the program that it helps them develop the skills to engage in relationships with their teacher, their friends, their parents. I mean, I can't tell, even you know, we've heard from parents even saying how just the communication, is better, the conflict is less, and so it improves all types of it has the potential to improve all types of relationships. All right, and so what strategies kind of have you used to help sustain the program in your school? Obviously you've got your administrators who buy into this, but what do you do? What strategies do you employ?
Well, the great thing about being part of the Relationship Smarts team in Georgia is that you receive an annual county impact report based on the data you collect. This report also shows quotes from the students. And each year, obviously, I share this report with our principal as well as our superintendent. Another neat thing that I've done over the years is I actually invite the principal to sit in on some of the classes. It helps to show him what's being offered, and also so he can see how the students are engaged. And a really neat thing is this past year, he actually sat in on the lesson that we talked about pregnancy, STIs, and HIV. And truthfully, he was blown away not only by the engagement of the students, but the lack of knowledge that they showed during the lesson, which really allowed him to see that impact firsthand. Ted, you mentioned earlier about the parents and how they've discussed the benefits that the program has helped them with. But you know, the superintendent is also very impressed because of that impact.
That's great. That is great, and that's a good segue into our kind of our next topic, thinking about impact, right? So Cindy mentioned one things that I do to help support our agents is, you know, as we collect the data on what the kids are thinking and experiencing and learning from the program, we share that with each county so they can then share those results with their stakeholders, in this case the school. And so for those of you on today, you know, it's really important to think about how do you document impact. And in our case, what we do, you know, and when you think about impact, think of it as kind of 3 levels of impact. It's the immediate impact. It's that short-term impact, changes in how they're thinking, what they're feeling, their efficacy. And then that should lead to that intermediate impact where they're actually taking charge in terms of changing behavior. And then if they're doing all that, the hope is that it will lead to the long-term impact which is change at the community level, local outcomes. In this case, Cindy, got into this because she saw the high teen pregnancy rates. So that's the long-term outcome that she's hoping to see in her community, is that the teen pregnancy rate drops. And so I'm curious to hear from all of you, how do you measure impact? So if you are currently delivering the program, and Rebecca, if you'll put that next poll up for us, please. If you're currently delivering the program, how do you measure impact?
Okay, so 14% said not really, but want to. 14% said anecdotal feedback. 56% said brief survey, and 16% said rigorous research.
Excellent. Well, heads up, all the 16% who says rigorous research, don't be surprised if Kay Reed shoots you an email and says hello to you. But 56% kind of do some, nothing too fancy. And nothing too fancy can go a long way. In fact, let me show you, what we've been doing the last several years has been kind of basic, right? Now we're going to be moving into more rigorous research, which I'm really excited about, and I'm hoping, looking forward to that. But let me share with you a little bit about how just a little basic research can go a long way. Now here, and we'll share our slides with you later where you can get this citation, but a lot of Dibble Institute on their website, if you go under research tab, you'll see a lot of research that's been done. But what we did since we started this project with DFACS in 2017 is we administer a very brief survey at the end of the series. So after the kids finish the whole series, they fill out this little survey to tell us what they think. And so we collected this data from the 5,043 kids who completed the program anywhere between May 2017 through June 2019. And of those kids that participated, about 75% completed that survey at the end. You can see a little quick profile. I'm kind of going through this just a little quickly. We've got a few minutes left, and I want to save just a little bit of time for questions if there are any. And what we measured was their efficacy, which is a very brief scale. Asked 5 questions, 1 item on their self-esteem, 1 item asking them how likely are you to use these skills. Really simple, really basic, right? And what we did was we analyzed and we found kind of these 3 groups. We ran this analysis called latent class analysis, and we found we have those that had high efficacy, moderate levels of efficacy, and low efficacy when we look across those indicators that we measured. And then what we found was that those with actually higher efficacy are, as we would expect, are more likely to report that their intentions to use the skills, more likely to report higher self-esteem. And so you can kind of see that pattern there. And we know from research that when kids report higher efficacy and they report intentionality, intention to engage in the behaviors they learned, and they feel better about themselves, when you put those together, they are more likely to actually do what you've taught. They're more likely to follow through and practice those skills. Now, unfortunately, we haven't been able to follow the kids to see if they actually did that, right? But take a look here. This is some county and state data showing the pregnancy rates in Cindy's county, in Washington County. All of you should be able to access this in your own state, in your own county, to look at these trends. You can see when Cindy got started with this programming in 2013, where the pregnancy rates were, right? They actually took a jump in 2014. And you can see this is when she was doing after-school program, but then she transitioned to doing middle school. She reached every 7th grader in her county right? Every single one, all 7th graders got relationship smarts in 7th grade, the first core 6 lessons. And you can see what's happening now. And then in 2017, she started reaching every 7th and 8th grader. So by the time a middle schooler finished middle school, they had gotten the entire relationship smarts program before they went into high school. And you can see kind of what's happening in her county. Now, I want to preface this by saying this trend isn't caused by Cindy doing relationship smarts. We can't say that there's causation here, right? But it's a pretty interesting correlation here and pattern, particularly when what we see is that since Cindy started doing this programming in Washington County, her county has had a 49% drop in pregnancy rates. 49%, huge. Look at these rates down here. Now, compared to the rest of the state, which is this green line down here, they were showing a decline as well. But also this red line shows all other rural counties in the state. So, which Washington County is a rural county. Their rate only dropped 25%. So in her county, the drop in pregnancy rates was much steeper than in all other rural counties in the state. Now, is that because of relationship smarts? I don't know, but I'd like to think so, all right, that they're just becoming more relationship smart. The other thing we see is STD rates in her county. Again, what's interesting is her county is one of those poster childs, Cindy got attracted to this because of a poster, but it's one of those counties where it's like, this is where you want funding to go because you've got these high rates. STD rates are also much higher than most the rest of the state and other rural counties. And in her county, since she started doing relationship smarts, has had a 34% drop in STD rates. However, in all other rural counties, they have on average seen an 11% increase in STD rates. So again, not causation, but an interesting correlation here. So this is a way to show some impact. It's really important that when you're doing these programs that you're looking at these trends. It's helpful for your stakeholders, your schools. And so I just want to close with kind of our key takeaway points that from what we've discussed and what Cindy has shared is, one, be patient and persistent. Cindy's been doing this a while and she's still doing it. It's not one of those things you can stop and go and say, I'm going to make a community impact. If you really want to make a sustainable community impact, you've got to be persistent. And those trends in pregnancy and STD rates, I think, are a testament to her persistence in this programming. As Cindy mentioned earlier, relationships matter with not just the kids, but the teachers, the superintendents, the parents. So all of that matters. And as the saying goes, the proof is in the pudding. So for those who aren't currently collecting data, even just simple data to show impact, really think about doing that because it's a great way to show your story to show your impact, share your story, and sustain your programming. And so with that, I'll pause and see if there are questions for Cindy or myself before we kind of wrap up here.
So we have room for 2 quick questions, Ted. The first one was, how many weeks was this program delivered? I think, Cindy, did you say once a month for 8 months?
I did it once a month.
Okay. And what about parental permission slips, parental information times, opting out? How did that work?
Well, we actually initially had parental permission slips that we had to have filled out by the parents for the kids to participate. And that was every child, every parent had to return that. Well, it later got to the point where we went to where a letter would go home to parents, and if they chose for their child not to participate, then they would return the letter saying that I am not interested in my child participating. And truthfully, we didn't have any of those. And in the beginning, when we had that initial letter that went home that said parents have to sign it, it was kind of neat to me how kids kept going to their parents to be added to the class. Say maybe we had 50% of students in that particular class, and by the end of the the year, we had pretty much 100% because kids were talking to kids about what it was, and they wanted to participate.
So the power of opt-in versus opt-out. So I'm sorry, we're going to have to bring this to a close. You guys did an amazing job, and there are other questions I have that we'll send to you, and then we'll put those Q&A out on the website. So Ted, if we're going to get the next slide, please. Thank you for joining us. The webinar will be online in a couple days, and you will get an email to that effect. Here's our emails if you want to contact us directly. Next slide. There's all kinds of ways to stay in touch with us, the usual things, but visit our website. It's a great place, lots of good resources. And finally, which is kind of timely, next month our webinar is by Project Evident from Boston about how to build evidence through small tests of change. So I think that given what Ted has just left us with, I think it'll be a great webinar to have next. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you in October. Take good care. Bye-bye.